Hello and welcome everybody to our latest live series webinar, diving into the Cyber 5 winners. We're just about a week away from, or a week has passed since Cyber 5 occurred. We were going to do this webinar actually last week. We wanted to highlight how we can really dig into the data really, really quickly. But we understand it's a pretty crazy time of year and actually fully expect a lot of folks to catch this on the replay. But if you have questions or comments, you can feel free to chime in to the chat. You're in the right place. So my name is Ryan Hilliard. I am HypeAuditor, and we're going to be diving into some of the best campaigns and content we saw during Cyber 5 just this past week, and how people are going to be carrying that into the new year or into the rest of the holiday season and then into the new year in terms of a strategy. A couple of goals for today is how can you use this information, these insights, to perhaps recharge the campaigns that you're running right now through that last ship day, which is probably about a week and a half away for most people. And so real tangible tactical insights. And if you're a user of our platform, you'll get to see some ways to pull more value out of some of our competitive tools. All that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into things here. Once again, we'll have this recorded so that you can actually catch it in the future, pass along to folks. We know it's super, super busy time, but we wanted to get these insights out there. So we're going to cover two topics today. One is we're going to recap Cyber 5 from an industry perspective and from an influencer marketing perspective. We're also going to give out some fake medals worth points that don't matter, but wanted to recognize some brands that saw really exceptional content results and maybe can be a little bit of inspiration for you influencer marketers out there as you're trying to figure out, like, why didn't the plan that we put together really take off like we had expected? Why did the content get the reach that we wanted? We want to try to highlight some of those winners that did actually exceed probably what they were hoping, and what you can learn from that. The next thing is we want to dive into how you can use even some of our own tools to pull the data that we're going to show here in a little bit. How did we come across these insights? So it's how you can analyze different brands, whether they're competitors or maybe they're just adjacent brands, or they're just brands that you like. Like, how can you learn from what they're doing to use within your own efforts? So first thing we're going to dive into here is just a recap of the Cyber 5 periods from an industry perspective, from an influencer marketing perspective. Then we'll talk about some content winners, what we liked about them. You've probably seen the stat. This is a pretty standard stat that's been everywhere, right? Shopify, one of the really cool things that they do is they allow you insight into like what's happening. They have a great pulse on all things e-commerce because there's so much penetration for brands that are using Shopify as their sort of foundation. So they came out and announced like a huge increase, like 24% year over year in terms of sales driven through their merchants for the Cyber 5 period. And like at a peak moment, it's like 12:01 p.m. Eastern time, I believe, 4.2 million sales in that minute alone. So huge growth. Hopefully, as marketers, as you're watching this, you're seeing the same thing. Hey, how do I compare to the market, right? It's always good to benchmark yourself. Like, did you see growth beyond what you were expecting? How does that compare to what happened industry-wide? Obviously, there's going to be some variation in different verticals. Maybe your seasonality is going to be a little bit different, but this is a good way to make sure, like, hey, rising tide, how did we perform? Did we exceed? Did we lag? Maybe lagging is still okay if maybe last year you were down year over year, or maybe this exceeded what your year over year growth was up into this point. So this is a positive, right? But this is just meant to give you a benchmark. So overall, great signs for the market, for e-commerce, for brands to see that growth. From an influencer marketing perspective, we saw huge increases in terms of engagements with influencers. So more than 50% more accounts were leveraged, almost double the number of posts year over year from influencers mentioning Black Friday and sales. So we saw more and more brands working with influencers to create content I think an awesome thing to see here as well is the engagement rate actually went up 20% in this content. So you all as marketers are seeing, how can I drive engagement? How can I work with the right influencers? How can I work with authentic influencers? So I see the engagement, I see the sales result from it. It's not just a sort of spray and pray approach. It's more methodical. It's more thought out. How can I drive long lasting value from this relationship? So huge win, lots of reach, lots of engagement, and growth there. On the brand side, lots of brand accounts getting into promoting Black Friday year over year. You can see 20,000 more accounts posting content around Black Friday. Once again, we talked about it in our content webinar a couple weeks ago. Brands tend to struggle with driving that same level of engagement as a creator does. It's pretty logical. A little bit of growth and engagement rate, but I think the most valuable thing is just continuing to put content out there, making sure that you're promoting your sales. One thing that I like from both of these charts is that the number of accounts and the number of posts, like you're seeing more than one post per account. You can't just put one Black Friday post out there the morning of Black Friday and say, oh, I did my job, wait for all the sales. When people consume things at different times, so it's always good to share posts throughout the process, share posts throughout the day. When you're working with an influencer, making sure you're posting at least more than one time leading up to it as well. But this is just during that 5-day period. So really, really awesome results overall. In terms of the content format, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You can see that video where we dove into like holiday prep and making sure that you're doing the right things. There's a bit of a shift around, right? So brands lean more into like very thoughtful images in terms of their posts promoting Black Friday. Whereas when you're partnering with an influencer, they're leaning much more on video. They're putting out reels. And we're going to see the value of those reels when they have that viral potential. They get exposure to many, many more people, not just followers, right? And what that can do to brands, even small brands, how that can drive up massive amounts of awareness and engagement and ultimately sales. But this is sort of the mix. I think it's interesting to see the differences here. Now, if you're a brand, if you just start making videos, does that mean that they're going to be viral? Not necessarily, right? Like it doesn't, just doing that action doesn't work that way. But I think it's a good mental note, like, hey, posts are going to be pretty limited in overall reach, but there is some potential in this other format, right? So that's sort of state of the industry, seeing that growth overall and actually accelerating year over year. So now let's give out some content awards. If you haven't watched it, we created a video, or we created a webinar a couple weeks back around creating compelling content, right? And so one of the things that I always like to see when we do these webinars is some of the most impactful ads that we saw followed a lot of things that we were recommending a couple weeks ago. Now, is it a coincidence? Not necessarily. Like these aren't revelationary things that we're recommending, but I think it's a good reminder that there are checkboxes to creating good, compelling content. Now, is it going to make it go viral or it's going to make it explode? Not necessarily, but you should still always check these boxes. So we're going to start with an honorable mention for PopFlex Active and the account, sort of like the owner of that brand, sort of visionary for that brand, Blogilates, put out this really, really awesome reel with this hat that she designed. She actually walks through the design of the hat, shows it in real time as well, putting it on. She's showing what's unique about it, sort of unique selling features to it. Huge impact in terms of overall reach, lots of engagement. Now, this is just an honorable mention for a couple of reasons. A couple of things that we would tweak with this particular video was, it is a funny video, right? But it didn't really get to the content of like, what am I actually talking about for a little while. Now, sometimes you'll see accounts that are like influencer accounts, and then they build a brand as well separately. And so that there's a little bit of this natural, people associate what she's doing with the brand that she has. But when something goes into reels, when something is going out to the general public, right, people that are not familiar, that lag in showing what the point of this video is can be lost on folks. You just sort of miss out on that engagement. And she also wasn't tying it directly to her even brand account directly. So even though she saw all of this growth and this engagement, I'm sure she saw great sales and she had links in her bio for the product. We actually didn't see very substantial brand growth in this chart. The little bump on the far right is the Black Friday growth, right? Much smaller than what was happening at the very, very beginning of November for the brand Popflex Active. So a little bit of a missed opportunity to get more exposure for the brand itself, but also as a creator, I think that she probably sees value in getting that engagement for her account. In terms of bronze medals, we're going to hand out a bronze medal to Tush Baby. And this is not just because I'm a parent, but when we were looking at the analytics, and I'll show you this report that we ran, we saw really awesome engagement rates with this video that was put out, real life usage from an actual brand ambassador that really exploded in terms of interest. You can see huge follower growth for the brand. So that's like that nurturing opportunity. You can continue to do marketing to these people, that long-term value. Now, reasons that she's in bronze and not silver or gold, a lot of negative sentiment around this video as well. Like it's one of the potential risks when you see that virality in reels from people that are not necessarily followers. You get lots of comments, right? I can assure you, being a parent of 3, that most of these people making these comments are not parents carrying around your child. I probably wouldn't wear the bag, but I totally get the appeal of it. So maybe that's a little bit of the downside here, some negative sentiment overall, but huge win for the brand. Great exposure for this brand ambassador. Probably can turn this to a more strategic relationship as a brand. Lots of nurturing opportunities down the road. So bronze medal to Tush Baby. We think it was great. Silver medal is actually going to a more multi-channel brand personality. The Curiosity Box is a brand founded by Vsauce, who's huge YouTuber. There's a few different accounts associated with him, but he also has Instagram account. And so sort of cross-promoting things that he does science-related, right, tied to his YouTube content, but also folding in the brand. And we saw huge amounts of growth, huge reach from this beyond even like the number of followers, just really, really, really high engagement. We love to see somebody that's, hey, a really big YouTuber, like 20 million subscribers or something like that on YouTube, trying to use other channels to pull people over to this brand. We saw really good growth in the brand follower count throughout the year. You could see it sort of inflex again the very end of that graph right into November. So I think really, really good value. Now, silver medal here, because could have tied in that account actually itself, the Curiosity Box by Vsauce. No mention of it in the post, no hash. Like it's just, I think a little bit of a missed opportunity, but huge growth, lots of engagement, lots of sharing. So that's sort of our silver medal. Also a smaller brand, right? This is a box brand, science, quirky things, delivery boxes. It's a tough market, right? He's got limited edition boxes. So I think we want to try to recognize some of those smaller brands and what they're doing, not just, the big winners that are always doing the same thing, which is great, but we want to try to shine a light in other places. So gold medal, and we're going to go into like how we find some of this data using our reports as well. But we want to hand out our gold medal in terms of promotion content. And it's going to go out to Home Run Pet Global. This video, and probably people watching this have seen this video. It exploded, right? Emily X Foster's is an influencer with like 80,000 followers. Not a huge influencer, right? But part of the reason that you create lots of different content types, right? She created this video, not just a story, but she created an actual video an actual reel, is you get that viral potential. And when it's the content is cute kittens inside a box that looks like an air fryer, blow drying the cat, like you can all of a sudden get this huge breadth of reach. Now, is that the same thing as like the addressable market for people that would buy this? Not necessarily, but I think seeing millions of likes, this is the most liked content that we had in the report I'm going to show here in a second, from a much smaller relationship, right? The investment payoff in this partnership was huge for Home Run Pet. Probably way beyond what they ever expected it to be. Hopefully they had their website prepared for all of the influx of people coming to visit their site. Hopefully they see this growth in follower count, 25% basically overnight, translate into more nurturing, more marketing, and for the future. Everything about this was great. The match with a person who fosters cats is creating content that, like, it's a really, really perfectly aligned fit. And when you combine like very clear calls to action, very clear mentions, pointing people directly to what you want them to do, you get this really compounding value. Of course, you have to have a great video or some great piece of content in this case. And it's not just because our mascot is a cat. We want to give that gold medal promotion to Home Run Pet Global and that partnership with Emily X Foster. So really great shout out to them there. So now we're going to shift gears, right? So this is our live webinar series. And if you've never watched one of these webinars before, we sort of have things operate at two different levels. One is maybe a 30,000 foot view of like what's happening, what are things you should be doing, best practices. And then the other is how can we like practically glean insights from tools, right? If you're a customer of ours, you might have these tools. If you're just curious, right? How do you find the most engaging content on the market with ease? Like, how do you do that? We want to make sure that we're showing like how you can do that practically. So I was going to spend 5 or 10 minutes diving into a couple of different reports that we ran, some for this actual analysis, and then others just trying to break down brands that we thought did a really, really good job with their campaigns and how you can kind of compare those with other brands and what's happening in this space. So this, as I've mentioned in previous live series, because it's live, things can go a little bit wrong, but we're prepared. So I'm going to shift gears. We're going to change from this presentation to a report. All right. So one of the things that we like to highlight is like how you can use this practically, right? So my colleague, Nick, I said, hey, we want to do this webinar on like who won Black Friday, Cyber Monday. How do we find this? He actually used our own tool, right? Compiled we call it a competitor analysis tool, but you can run it on hashtags, you can run it on brands, whatever it might be, for these concepts: Black Friday, Friday deal, Cyber Monday, all of these mentions, to get a pulse of what's happening in the market. So we can see at a high level, right, the potential earned media value out there. Who is the audience seeing this based off of the makeup of the influencers? Now, this is based on the US. We wanted to limit the geography to make it a bit more digestible, right? So what happened in the US during Black Friday? Who were the winners? What was happening? What big brands were happening out there? What was getting the most engagement? So these reports really do make it easy to see, like, hey, were brands doing a lot of prep, right? Were influencers talking about the Black Friday partnerships leading up to the big pop? And we could see that, obviously, right? We could see posts begin to build up beginning in like the 11th or 12th of November. And then there's a big jump on the 20th, which is that week of Black Friday. So everybody's getting ready. And then you see that pop, right? That huge, huge increase on the 24th. You see that overall reach, you see the number of posts. And so you can use this to understand, hey, people were doing a lot of that due diligence that we talked about a couple webinars ago, being ready, letting your audience know, hey, we are doing this sale. It's not going to be a surprise, but getting them ready to allocate some of the budgeting dollars that they have for the month or for this purchasing period to put it towards me. It's always a good idea to let people know, like, hey, we are going to be doing a sale, so that they know I'm going to sit tight a little bit, especially during this sale period, right? When it's Black Friday and everybody's doing sales. Understanding where, like, in the country this is all happening. So cities, obviously, this is going to be Black Friday's everywhere, right? It's not going to be limited. So we could see some breakdown. I think we expect it to be major metropolitan areas. I think it's interesting to see from these influencers posting content, the age and gender mix. Maybe it actually skews even a little bit more younger than I would have thought. This is specifically Instagram, but 20% of that female reach was 18 to 24, which is really, really significant, skewing much more female than male in terms of the audience of these influencers with these promotions for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Perhaps a little bit also tied to the network. That's a possibility. But I think really, really interesting insight there. Types of content used, super heavy on Reels. Here's our most liked video. If you haven't seen it, you really, really should watch it. It's really adorable, but you can see the engagement rate because the amount of reach it got by going into people's Reels and being served up to them, even if they're not following this person individually, because it was so engaging, right? There's a lot of value there. Other hashtags that are happening, day parts of when things went live, right? So if you're thinking about this in the context of other brands, when are other brands posting content? What is the value of that in terms of how many posts and what is the engagement rate? Obviously, this is a Black Friday report, so we expect to see it on Friday. Reach, what influencers were getting the most reach out there, the most active ones. So this is one of those reports and how you can kind of glean those insights. And this is how we did it for our industry insights. And when we're pulling industry insights for any of our reports, so we'll do a state of influencer marketing. We're just using our own data this way, right? We have a vast amount of data that we have access to that we've compiled. And so we're able to do all of that here. It's nothing super, super fancy. Well, maybe this is fancy, but if you're thinking like, I would love to be able to pull these types of insights myself for my competitive landscape, you can really, really easily. So let's shift to that. So like I said, this is one of our live webinar series. So we're actually like practically and tangibly like going into different tools that we have. So this is one of our competitive insights dashboards. And so one of the brands that we thought that had a really, really effective campaign based off of the size of their brand and the reach that they were able to obtain and the influencers that they were partnering with. Ikaur, I think is how we pronounce it. It's a sleepwear account. They do a lot on Amazon, but they also have their own account. Did a really, really exceptional job. And so we wanted to see like, well, how do we stack up what they've done to a lot of their closest competitors? Notori, Cozy Earth, Hannah Anderson, Pajamagram. What is the difference in their strategies and their approach to influencer marketing? And so one of the cool things about this dashboard is it makes it really, really simple to see how does my strategy compare to others and how is my effectiveness compared to others. So during this holiday period, right, we can see our brand as Ikaur, like that growth, right? In October and November, the number of posts, the amount of reach. But we can also see our competitors seeing even greater reach in Hannah Anderson. But the smaller ones, we see those spikes, but it's not as much. Maybe that's why we didn't notice as much coming from our direct competitors if we were this brand, right? We can easily see how that's changing over time. If we're curious around what Hannah Anderson did, what kind of partnerships that they put into place to see that huge, huge growth, we could see a mega influencer partnership, right? That's going to drive up that reach drastically. Just that one partnership. Now, when we remove it, things become a bit more normal and reasonable, and the amount of people and posts and reach that they have actually much more comparable to Ikaur. But who was that influencer? What did they do? We can easily click on it and see who these partnerships were with, what was the reach that they had, how many likes, right? So Kris Jenner partnership, obviously that's going to explode in terms of total reach. A couple of other really, really big partnerships as well. But this gives us some idea of like, okay, mega influencers, this is how they're really, really extending. It's probably mostly just from this one post. And then you can dive into it and decide, is this legitimate value? Is this going to be worth this level of partnership? Maybe we need to discount this mega partnership when we're comparing this other brand because maybe this isn't going to be aligned with us, right? So it really gives you that context to understand what's happening in your space. I think one of the cool things about these reports is being able to look at it through the lens of how do I compare to like 7 of my other closest competitors? That's really what I want to know. You can specify that many. Now I've only put 5 in here. A couple of other interesting things I wanted to highlight that we like to look at is like engagement, how it's changing over time. So all of this is sort of fluid and dynamic, understanding what's happening over time, not just a single snapshot like that other report was. So really, really valuable. When were these mentions from huge influencers occurring? I want to analyze the posts of them for a specific brand. We can easily do that. Lots of different insights that we can look into. We can filter things. So really, really trying to bring to your fingertips this pulse of like these competitors I really, really care about because they will directly impact the results that you are seeing. A couple of other cool things, automatic campaign detection. So seeing a grouping of hashtags from different influencers during a set period of time, that can probably give you some idea of like, why am I not seeing the reach that I was before? Oh, I see that there is a Christmas is coming theme of posts happening from Hannah Anderson, 7 different influencers, 7 different mentions, lots of reach. Okay, this is going to directly impact my results because people are going to be buying pajamas from them and not from me, right? Especially if it's a direct competitor. You have to think about it as an exchange. If I lose that customer, they're not going to buy from both of us, right? So if they gain them, I lose them. And so this keeps a pulse on all of that. Obviously, you can look through top content. You can look at it across all of the brands, across yourself. So this is just something that we think is really, really valuable. We're seeing more and more brands and even agencies use this type of data to audit and understand what's happening in this space to know how do I take action moving forward. The last thing I wanted to highlight in terms of like a specific brand use case, just to wrap up our webinar today, was just like the most common one that we probably have seen. We're going to see a lot more of it as we head into the new year, is that same competitor analysis report looking at Gymshark, right? Everybody knows who Gymshark is. They have a huge, huge brand ambassador program. But one of the really interesting things about this is if you sell something not directly competitive to Gymshark, or you have a mobile app that's not directly competitive, but it's the same buyer, it's the same person, the audience is ultimately the same because people buy multiple things. You could look at a brand doing something that you know they're doing it very, very well. They have built their business off of this ambassador program. They execute really, really well. And I want to understand what types of content are they doing that are helping take off, right? What are the things that are really, really effective? What are the things that are not so effective? And so one of the cool things about these reports is you're able to look at content mentions of this brand during a specified period and say, I want to look at certain size influencers. I want to make sure that I'm like evaluating certain types of content, and then I can easily see engagement rates compared to others for that certain content type and figure out like what's different about these, what's driving more performance than others. Maybe I know I'm never going to partner with huge influencers. Maybe my budget just isn't going to allow for it, but I could put that same lens of like, maybe I'll find creators from sort of their sort of portfolio network of creators and say, hey, how can I recruit them to me? I'm not competitive, but we serve the same buyer. So if they have a high performing creator, that might be a great partnership for me. So instead of keyword searching and looking around, I can easily just run one of these reports and say, hey, find me a reasonably sized account for my budget. Maybe it's 10,000 to 100,000 followers. And maybe I want to make sure that it's an individual account, not a brand account. Maybe I want to make sure that they're in the United States and not internationally. And I can easily produce a result of influencers. And then the cool thing is I can say who of these influencers is really, really high performing, right? I can see the quality of their audience. I can see, hey, they've partnered with this person. They've done 15 posts. It's not just a one-off. So they have a pretty strategic relationship, or at least they're an ambassador at a certain level where they're doing regular content here. And so I can sort of vet this person this way versus having to search them out because I know there's this good audience and brand affinity that would align really, really well with me. And so this is one of the ways that we're seeing a lot of brands and agencies sort of think about recruitment of other creators and building out that sort of base of influencers beyond just like searching and messaging. Hey, I really want to find truly effective people that are reaching the right audience. Just a sort of a backwards way of looking at them and then evaluating how that content is performing over time. Cool. Well, again, that was sort of our live Cyber 5 deep dive into winners, how you pull that content together, how you make sense of it, how you glean those insights on what brands are doing, what's happening in my sort of space. If you think about it in terms of hashtags, analyzing hashtag behavior, you can understand like how is my specific vertical evolving, or the interest of my audience, how are they evolving. So we wanted to highlight that today. I appreciate everybody who takes the time to watch this webinar, especially if it's before the end of the new year. I know it's a super busy time with the holidays and making sure that you're getting Q4 results in before that last ship day. Hopefully you can either do this in some downtime during some lunch, or you're able to see some inspiration to apply to your campaigns right now. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at HypeAuditor. We'll have some more webinars coming in the new year, things like using social listening to find creators, the best ways to find creators for 2024. And of course, we'll do our state of influencer marketing for 2024 in January. So thank everybody for taking the time to watch this and enjoy your holiday season, and best of luck out there.